Alright, this is the fourth and final part of our lesson about quadratic functions. In this video, we will continue to solve quadratic equations. In the last video, we were solving quadratic equations, but we're pretty much told which method to use. We know, let's see, how many methods? Some of the methods that we've learned are, to use square roots, okay, and we can do this. We'll do square roots when there's only one type of x, like if it's only x or only x squared. If there's x and x squared, we need to do something else. Another method that we learned is factoring. Alright, of course factoring only works when it's factorable. Another method that we learned is completing the square. Okay, for that method it's important that the middle term is even, and it helps if there's no number in front. The leading coefficient is 1. And we haven't done it in this lesson yet, but we know a fourth method, which is called the quadratic formula. Okay, quadratic formula is great to use when the problem is unfactorable, but yet it's given in standard form. When we have the two different kind of x's, and it's unfactorable, quadratic formula is great to use. Anyway, so we'll be choosing from among these four methods. From problem number 20, I'm seeing that we only have one kind of x. You know, we don't have x and x squared. So anytime we just have one type of x, completing the square is a great way to go. Okay, and so your first step is to get the parentheses. Okay, get this part of the equation by itself. So obviously the first thing you would do is add 40 to both sides. Okay, so that's going to give you x plus 2 squared is equal to 49. Alright, next to unsquare things, we use square root. So I would take the square root of both sides. Please don't forget it will be plus or minus anytime you take the square root of both sides of an equation. So that gives us x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus 7. Alright, square root of 49 is 7. We still need to get x by itself, so let's subtract 2 from both sides. But when you have a plus or minus, put it in the front. So that's going to give us, and I think I'll bring it up over here. So that's going to give us x equals negative 2 plus or minus 7. Do not stop here. Got to keep going. Got to keep going. Because negative 2 and 7 can be added and subtracted. So we got to do that. So this is going to give us x equals negative 2 plus 7. X equals negative 2 minus 7. There's your plus or minus from the plus or minus. So this gives us x equals 5, or x equals negative 9. Okay, so those are the solutions for number 20. Alright, number 21, you got a trinomial. So I could either factor or use the completing the square, because this is even. I would definitely try factoring first. It's the type of thing that we often factor. And also I'm looking at the 5. Okay, x squared is clearly x times x. 5 is 5 times 1. And as I look at that, I'm thinking maybe. Inner we have 5x. Outer we have 1x. Inner plus outer must equal middle. What would the signs have to be to give me a positive 4? Well, I would need a positive 5x and a negative 1x. So that would be positive 5 and negative 1. Okay, we also have to make sure we're getting the negative 5. Positive 5 times negative 1 is negative 5, so we're good. Alright, once you have it factored, to solve it, you have to keep going and set the factors equal to 0. So either x plus 5 could equal 0, that would give you a solution, or x minus 1 might equal 0. So subtracting 5 from both sides, we get x equals negative 5. Adding 1 to both sides gives us x equals 1. So these are the solutions for number 21. Alright, for number 22, I only see one type of x. Alright, I see x squared. Now if there were another x over here, I would get 0 on one side and I'd either factor it or use the quadratic formula or complete the square. But since I only have one type of x, the best method is to use square roots. So let's get this x squared by itself. So I would subtract 28 from both sides. So that would give me 2x squared is equal to negative 24. And then I would divide both sides by 2. So that'll give me x squared is equal to negative 12. And now let's take the square root of both sides. Alright, don't forget when you take the square root of both sides, the solution is always plus or minus. Now be very careful. We have this negative under the radical. You have to remember what that means. So I've got x equals. When you take the square root of a negative number, you're going to have I. Okay, so put plus or minus and then I. Please don't put the I out before the plus or minus. Okay, so we have plus or minus I root 12. And then let's simplify the root 12 off to the side. The square root of 12 is 4 times 3. Okay, I emphasize that because 4 is a perfect square. Square root of 4 is 2. So that is 2 radical 3. Okay, so that means I have I have x equals plus or minus. Now I'll put in the I in a second, but radical 12, like I said, is 2 radical 3, and the I goes right in the middle between them. Okay, so that's it. That's the answer for number 22. Okay. Last problem, I think. Nope, not the last problem. There's apparently a whole nother page that I didn't see. Anyway, there's only one type of x. So we're definitely going to use the square root method again. So subtract 63 from both sides. So that's going to leave us with 2/5 x squared is equal to, let's see, what is that, negative 50. Okay, now when you have a denominator, one thing you can do is multiply both sides by whatever's in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 5 on both sides in order to cancel out these 5's. That's going to leave me with 2x squared is equal to negative 250. Alright, then we will divide both sides by 2. And that will give us x squared is equal to negative 125. Whoa. Okay. Alright, so again, we take the square root of both sides. Don't forget that plus or minus. Again, when you have a negative under the radical, that's going to be I. So I have x equals plus or minus I radical 125. Okay, we can simplify the square root of 125 off to the side. Square root of 125. Okay, 125, clearly 25 divides evenly into this. So this is the same thing as 25 times 5. Okay, the square root of 25 is 5. And the other 5 is going to still be stuck under the radical. So it'll be 5 and then radical 5. Then, yeah, the calculator will do it for you. But you still need to know how to do it by hand. Okay, so that's going to give us x equals plus or minus, like I said, 5 root 5, and then there's your I right there. So that's the answer to number 23. Okay, number 24 is mentioning the discriminant. As soon as you see the word discriminant, they are referring to the quadratic formula. This is the quadratic formula. Memorize it. The part under the radical is called the discriminant. So b squared minus 4ac, without the radical on it, by the way, just b squared minus 4ac is called the discriminant. Alright, because from that number alone we can decide if there will be one solution or two solutions or zero solutions, and whether or not the solutions will be imaginary. And here's how we determine that. Okay, the discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, is either going to be positive, or it's going to turn out to be negative, or it'll be 0. Those are the only three possibilities. So if the discriminant is positive, alright, and this is the most common, alright, that means we're in the normal situation where the parabola has two x-intercepts, which represent the two real solutions. So for example, let's say if we had a problem like this, and you see the discriminant is positive 16, you'd have this and this, and that would turn out to be 5 and 1, like normal. On the other hand, if the discriminant is 0, that means the parabola is just barely touching the x-axis once. So there will be one real solution. And you can see how that would work if you were doing a problem. The discriminant goes under the radical. So if that's 0, then you have 6 plus or minus nothing. So that's just 6. So the reason why we normally get two solutions is because we're adding and we're subtracting something. If you're not adding and subtracting anything, you're only going to have one solution. And on the other hand, if the discriminant is negative, that means you're in a situation where the parabola doesn't have any x-intercepts at all. So there won't be any real solutions, but there will be two imaginary solutions. Now that makes sense. Again, the discriminant is under the radical when you solve the problem. And you know that when you take the square root of a negative number, you're going to have I. Alright, so your solutions will be imaginary. Okay, so in short, if the discriminant is positive, there will be 2 real solutions. If it's 0, there will be 1 real solution. And if it's negative, you will have 2 imaginary solutions. Alright, so let's start by finding the discriminant, which I think I will do in purple. Alright, so the discriminant again is b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so that's going to be so you know, this is a, b, and c. So b squared, so I'm talking about 14 squared minus 4 times 3 times negative 24. This is the discriminant. Alright, so that's 484. Positive 484. Alright, so that's the discriminant. Alright, since the discriminant is positive, that means that we will have, there will be 2 real solutions. Okay, so that's one of the things we were supposed to determine. Alright, so we were supposed to use the discriminant. Alright, so we found the discriminant, and we were supposed to use it to tell whether it has 1 root, 2 roots, or no roots. Alright, so it has 2 real solutions, or roots. But then we're supposed to go ahead and find the roots. The roots are just the solutions. Okay, so don't get thrown by that word. So let's go ahead and continue the quadratic formula to find the roots. So according to the quadratic formula, x will equal, you know, opposite of b plus or minus square root blah 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 over 2a. So first, opposite of b. b is 14, so the opposite of b is negative 14. Okay, plus or minus square root. Then it's b squared minus 4ac, which we already found, so that's 484. All over 2a. A is 3, so 2a is 6. Alright, the next thing you do is put the square root part in your calculator. So square root of 484. I do not recommend putting the whole thing in your calculator. Okay, that's 22. Okay, so I have negative 14 plus or minus 22. Because this is now just a rational number, alright, there's no square root anymore. We will definitely keep going, and we will split this up as the 2 possibilities that we have. Alright, so either x is going to equal negative 14 plus 22 over 6, or x could equal negative 14 minus 22 over 6. Alright, so you know that's going to be 8. So actually, alright, I wouldn't do it this way if I were just doing it by myself in privacy. But several of you, unfortunately, are really bad at adding and subtracting, you know, with negative numbers and such. So I recommend at least double checking your work by just typing it in. Negative 14 plus 22 over 6. Negative 14 plus 22 divided by 6. Okay, so that's 4/3. Okay, same thing with a minus sign. If you want, you can go back to this and just edit it and just change that plus to a minus. So that's negative 6. Okay, so those are the answers to number 24. Okay, number 25, we will continue to use the quadratic formula. But we need to get everything on one side of the equation to do it. So I would add 12x to both sides. Alright, so far that gives me 9x squared plus 12x is equal to negative 4. But I would also add 4 to both sides. So that gives me 9x squared plus 12x plus 4 is equal to 0. Okay, now we're supposed to find the discriminant. Alright, so let's find the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So that means the discriminant is 12 squared minus 4 times 9 times 4. That is 0. The discriminant is 0. Well, we learned that when the discriminant is 0, that means that there is one real solution. Okay? Or using the wording from the directions, there's one root. Alright, so fine, we know that there will be one root. Now we're supposed to go ahead and actually find it. So picking up from this equation right here, I would use this form of the equation. We will do the quadratic formula now. Okay, so the quadratic formula, alright, opposite of b plus or minus square root. So the opposite of b, so b is 12. So the opposite of b, so I've got negative 12 plus or minus square root. Alright, now it's supposed to be b squared minus 4ac, but we already did that, and we know it is 0. All over 2a. Well, a is 9, so 2a is going to be 18. Alright, but square root of 0 is just 0, so we can just stop writing that part. So this will be x equals negative 12 over 18. Alright, so we're just going to reduce this, but that'll be the final answer. Alright, both of these are divisible by 6, so hopefully you understand that you should be able to do this in your head. Alright, if I divide these both by 6, so that's going to be negative 2 over 3. Okay, so that is the answer for number 25. Alright, and that's it for the solving equations part of the lesson. That's going to be all for this video. So in the next video, which I know I had said that the last video would be the last video, but there's more. We will solve and graph quadratic inequalities on the next video. Come back and join me. I'll see you then.